Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a Pedigree morning. Pedigree is a red tea. It's from Yunnan Province, Fengcheng County. So we're going to talk a lot today about that environment. We're going to talk about a few other things, but over the months, there's been several questions about how we're able to be so successful within an ever-changing tea world in China. And as we reflected on this, one of the important things is the trust and the knowledge that we've built up over the years. And the trust side of it is really, really important. And how do you build that when you are trying to convince farmers, you're trying to interact with people in the tea industry, you're getting to know tea scientists? How do you start? How do you really focus in on that? It's all about relationship building. And one of the most important things is to be able to, as you identify who's going to be a reliable partner, just keep your ears to the ground, keep interacting with people, and keep cross-checking. So I'll give you a case in point. So early on, one of the things that we were trying to do, we'd been to quite a few farms that do Dragon Well. That's a green tea, by the way, famous green tea out of China. And nothing felt exactly right. And so we hadn't made any commitments to anybody. And we ran into a friend of a friend who was located on the eastern coast of China, in one of these cities it's hard to get into for a variety of reasons. It's Ningbo. And so we went down there. We spent time with this particular person who claimed that they had access to tea from the area and served us some of that tea, and we weren't overly impressed. And then as we worked through that relationship, what she said was that she had ability to introduce us into key people in the Dragon Well area. And she said, oh, I've got just the right person. Now, Xiaobei has a lot of experience in interacting with people in China. I have a lot of experience in interacting with people in China. And we were not unimpressed, but we just didn't know what the situation was. But we let it progress to an introduction. And so the funny thing is, prior to going to that introduction, we made a quick trip, not to that farm, but to another place where we met another tea friend who is not in the industry, used to be in the industry, related to the industry, but not actually doing that business now. And he happened to mention somebody, and we're trying to figure out who he's talking about. But he said, sometimes there are people who have big claims, but all they really are intermediaries, and they aren't the direct in source. And he said you have to be careful with that. Okay, understood. Message understood. Go to this meeting. We're sitting around with this farmer for dinner. This person is there, and then it's a little bit awkward since we didn't actually make this introduction ourselves. And we're used to doing our own self-introductions by and large, although we've been helped by people in the tea industry. And very early on, price of tea comes up in the conversation. And it was being shepherded, we could tell, by this person who had introduced us in. And she named a price kind of just across the table, and this is with the farmer and his family, and said, you know, X price ought to about do it, right? And turn to the farmer. Well, right away, we detected ledger domain in that. And the other thing that we always do is we always ask lots of questions. And when you ask lots of questions in the local area, you find a ton of information, including what the going price is for local people. And that's really important because the price that was tossed out there was 3 times the price going for local people. And so therefore, this was the value of building these type of relationships. We knew right away that something was wrong with this conversation. We cut the person that was the intermediary off, and we turned directly to the farmer and said, essentially, look, we know the price is roughly this. We're interested in trying some of your tea. We're interested in building a long-term relationship if that's what you're interested in. And the farmer made a snap decision and says, yes, that's what I'm interested in. And that was the start of a 15, 16-year relationship with this farmer. We obviously immediately eliminated the relationship with the intermediary who was there about trying to build her own source of income, but not really trying to help us. So I think part of my point is we really do ask a lot of questions. In China, when you're in the level, the elite level that we are, there's more risk involved if they provide inaccurate answers. If it's inaccurate because of an accident, that's no problem. If it's purposefully inaccurate, it doesn't just affect them, but it affects their relationship with everybody in that group. And that's where we are in the tea industry. And that's how we're able to get stuff that others aren't able to get. And that's how we're also able to verify, to work through problems. You've heard me talk before about the story of the farmer who delivered substandard tea to us one year. And we opened the box. It was the first box we opened. And both Qimen and I are thinking, okay, this doesn't feel right. And we have very good memories of aromas. We have very good memories of taste. She has a really remarkable memory of taste. She said, this just isn't right. And it didn't taste right to me. So we went back to the original sample, didn't match the sample. And again, because of the relationships, who did we go to? We didn't go to an outside arbitrator. That doesn't make sense in China. What makes sense is to go to the elite and say, what's your opinion? And that's what we did. And they said, oh, something wrong here. And so then they did the investigation and turned out that the farmer's warehouse had burned down. So we got the whole backstory, but the farmer tried to palm off something that was different than the sample when he still had his warehouse. And it just, and because of this, we were able to go to the farmer and say, look, be direct, be straight with us. We understand when things happen that are unexpected, or when things happen that seem to be special, and so therefore there seems to be a need for some change or for some alteration. Just be direct with us. And so we actually ended up giving this farmer another chance because he'd had a disaster. And in some way, he was trying to make up for it, but he was trying to do it without cluing us in. So here's what would have happened if this farmer had persisted and said, oh no, I gave you what I promised. I am going to get my money and you already have your tea. Here's what would have happened, because again, we have all these relationships at an elite level. He belongs to that elite group. He's one of the most famous farmers in China. And having said that, if you make that type of assertion when within the elite they know it's not true, then they have something called shunning. What is shunning? They stop including you in the activities that they have. When you need special favors, you can't go there. The door is shut. The way is blocked. And that is the thing that in all groups, whether it's tea or steel, any industry in China, they have the elite, and the elite operates like that. And everybody's friendly and helpful. You know, oh, I need to borrow $1 million. No problem, bro. You know, I put $1 million in your account. I happen to have an extra million. That stuff all goes away if there is a lack of trust and a lack of ability to execute according to what you say you're going to do. And so we understood this early on, and we understood this because Xiaobei was born in China and therefore understood those rules right away as part of the culture. And I understood it because I'd been going back and forth since 1973. So I know these rules. These things are drilled into both of us. And that's why, as we navigate the tea world, we're so successful, because when we say we're going to do something, we do it. If we don't do it, we give an accurate reason and we show and demonstrate that this is why we haven't done something. So that is really a key reason that we continue to be strongly regarded within the industry in China, within the elite in China. And that's what opens all sorts of doors. They know that they can take chances with us and introduce us, and will never embarrass them. So this is an element of how to really do the tea business. And actually in China, it's really a more general prescription of how to do business overall. Remembering, of course, that everybody talks to one another. You can't fool us. You can't fool the elite in the tea industry. Not going to happen. Just not going to happen. All right. So that I wanted to kind of give as an overall answer, because we've been asked many, many times, well, how do you have this success within the tea industry? And that's the real basis on which we have the success. All right, let's move to Fengcheng. This morning, while all of you were thinking about leaving the comfortable bed and getting ready for this morning's presentation, I sent you a map of Fengcheng in relationship to position in Yunnan. So Yunnan is in the southwest of China, borders Burma, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Fengcheng is to the central west of Yunnan. And it's about a 45-minute to an hour terrifying flight from Kunming to Linzang. Linzang is the seat of government for the county of Fengcheng. So you land in this airport that's about 7,500 feet above sea level. And again, it's truly a terrifying flight. Every time I've taken it, there's so much turbulence. But the good news is, according to the air hostesses on one of the flights who announced, "Oh, don't worry, you're not going to die today." And she said this in Chinese. I think I was the only one who laughed out loud while everybody else was gripping the sides of their seats because this thing was just all over the place. And somehow that was supposed to reassure me. The laugh made me reassured. And it was just hilarious that somebody would say that from my perspective. But we made it, and we've taken that flight a few more times. However, if we start up these trips to China, we will never take any of you if you come with us on that flight. Been there, done that. Ain't going to happen for customers yet. So I think now is a good time to have the tea master come and demonstrate the brewing of Pedigree. We'll get the stories. We'll talk about the pictures. We'll talk about Din Hung in a minute. So let's go ahead and have the tea master go ahead and demonstrate Pedigree.
Yes, Pedigree. Din Hung. Yes, this is we do Hong Cha. I call Din Hung. Fengqing Din Hung. This is in Yunnan, our province in China. It's the, one was in the same class, same, same section. So
yeah, same setup as usual.
Yes, I muted
Usually 2 cups, but we use 3 to cool the water down more quickly. 170-degree water is what you want to use for this.
problems are.
Oh, okay. Okay, I think that internet problems are apparently continuing. So, as such, what I suggest is, I don't have a way to, the internet seems to be working here perfectly well. And all the lights are showing other computers we have here are working. Nonetheless, if it's not working for you, something is wrong between here and where you're supposed to get it. So as such, I think what we'll do is go ahead and do a recording of this that you can watch at a later date, because I don't want you to sit around while we're trying to figure out if there's some other issue here, and I'll send you the YouTube link to that, and then you can watch at your convenience. I'm really sorry that this is turning out to be this way. I think we will show you the brewing right now, since we've already gone this far. And don't worry if there's no sound or everything's frozen for the time being. We'll go ahead and demonstrate this, and then we'll do a recording. So 7 grams in the cup. She preheated the cups, pouring on the side, 170 degrees water.
How many minutes? 2.
2 minutes.
And there's a second steeping you can get out of this, right?
Yes, 2, 1, 2. 2 minutes the first steeping, 1 minute the second steeping, and you can actually eke out a third steeping, 2 minutes.
Great.
Good. While this is going, even though you can't hear me, they can hear me?
Here, but the video is
Oh,
freezing.
video is freezing. Okay, well, I'll just talk then. And so I sent you pictures. I sent you the location, the map of where Fengqing is. When you get to Linsong, which is the nearest airport, it's another 2.5-hour drive through the mountains. And when you drive through the mountains, especially at night. It's really dangerous. And it's a relatively narrow road, but we've survived it the couple times that we've done that. And when you get to Fengqing, just outside of the township, there is a tea tree that's fenced off, and it is about 35 or 3,600 years old. And every year, the government, the local government harvests, it's a one-day harvest, and then they go ahead and auction off the leaves. And the leaves usually auction off somewhere between 60, 70, $80,000 per, I think 100 grams is what the quantity is that's auctioned off. So it's very dear. You can't ordinarily get access to this. We've been to that tree. We happened to be there quite by accident on the same day that they did a pick. And because we came early on that day, we were able to walk right up to that tree, actually touch the trunk, look at the leaves that had fallen to the ground. It's really an interesting experience. Fengqing has about 9,000 to 10,000 acres of ancient tree. Ancient tree is defined as 1,000 years or older. 1,000 years old or older. All right, the timer's gone off. Tea master is separating the tea leaves from the tea liquor. You save these precious leaves because you can get an outstanding second brew, second steeping. Look at the color of this. Very nice, pleasant color. Pedigree is an ancient tree. And we're going to enter the quality assessment arena. And the usual way we enter this, now, unlike the last 2 weeks where it was cliff tea and the temperature was 200 degrees, this is 170. So you're going to be able to take a bigger sip of this, cover the tongue, and really start to think about astringency in the mouth, aftertaste, and what are the energetics. In other words, how do you feel as you're drinking this? So I'm going to go ahead and do that. The second time around, what you're going to focus on, if you felt comfortable that you're getting an understanding of the elements that go into the quality arena, then you next expand to aroma and expand to taste. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Think about that as I'm taking this second steep, and I'm going to verify that what I think about astringency, aftertaste, and energetics is truly what I'm feeling. Okay. I have a really good understanding, I think, of this. And now that I understand that it's frozen screen, but that you can hear me, I think we'll continue all the way through. And at some later point, I'll do another recording that you'll be able to see on YouTube. But we're going to continue and finish this up because we've opened up the tea. Tea master is going to go ahead and brew along with you. Remember, she's cooling down the water. So unlike the cliff teas, 200 degree, and whether you're a little hotter or a little cooler, it doesn't really matter. But with this tea, with ancient tree from this area, it does matter. And 170 degrees or less is where you should be. If you are more, you will flatten the flavor. None of us like flattened flavor, so that's why we brew, and you note that we brew uncovered. Again, unlike the cliff teas that are brewed covered, this is brewed uncovered. So what you're trying to do is do everything you can to accentuate the flavor and aroma. You open bag number 3, labeled Pedigree. go ahead and put it in the heated cup, shake. Smell. And then go ahead and add the 170 degree or less water.
For those who have tea kettles that actually can heat up the water to just 170 degrees, are there other reasons to go ahead and go through the process of pouring water from one mug to another?
There are, but it doesn't make enough difference as a, for this tea. No, let me back up and say, yes, there are other reasons, but if you're in a hurry and trying to follow along with this, don't worry about that, because you'll get a brighter flavor again if you go ahead and do the mug to mug. And that has something to do with dissipating the steam, somehow perhaps oxygenate the water a little bit more versus just pulling it straight out at 170 degrees. But listen, you're still going to get a wonderful cup of tea, whether you do the cup to cup or you put it in straight in at 170 degrees. All right, so you set the timer for 2 minutes, which I actually did do, and you let this go ahead and steep. On the email that I gave you, you see that above the Zoom link, there's something, Chinese characters, 2 characters, Dian Hong. That really is important to understand because Dian is an abbreviation from an indigenous people's language for the province of Yunnan. And so many times there's a misunderstanding about Dian Hong. And so sometimes you see it translated as Yunnan Black. Realistically, it should have been Yunnan Red. And you think to yourself, oh, this is one tea. It's not. It's a description more of tea that comes. It originally was a description of teas that come from Fengcheng. It's grown to mean all the red teas that come out of Yunnan. Although traditionalists will say it's really the red teas that come out of Fengcheng, that county. Your timer went off. You're separating the leaves from the water. And yours should look something like this. And you should go then through the quality arena that we've talked about. And so the first thing to look at is kind of evaluate and smell these leaves. Let's give you something very, very pleasant right away. And this enter the quality arena, 170 degree sip, which is something that you can use to actually coat the tongue. You let it roll around in your mouth. You reflect on astringency levels. You reflect on, is there an aftertaste? And then as you do this again, you start to think about, okay, what is it that I'm smelling? What is it that I am tasting? And as you're thinking about that, we'll go through this Dian Hong a little bit more. Again, there's a misunderstanding that there's only one tea. So you have people, when we first open up, tell me, I want Dian Hong, as if it was only one tea. And when I say, well, which one? No, Dian Hong. No, it's still which one? Because there are oodles of those teas from Yunnan. It originally also started in 1938 in this particular factory in Fengcheng as the brand name of the tea that they were producing. And by the way, this became a hit right away. And you might be wondering to yourself, why in 1938 did they establish a factory there? Did they just start growing tea in that area? No, there were tea trees here for, again, thousands of years, harvested tea in this area for a long time, but it was not uniformly standardized. And when the Chinese in Anhui province could see the writing on the wall that the Japanese were coming their way, this tea scientist slash manager slash leader was assigned the task to get as far away from where still within China, but as far away from where the Japanese were as possible. And so he went to Yunnan, and he and his team looked around, scouted around for places to open a factory using the Anhui red tea methodology for actually processing the tea. And so when they got to Yunnan, they went to a lot of places, rejected a lot of places, and then settled on Fengqing. And they settled on Fengqing because the quality of the tea leaves was so good, and that the terroir, and that the farming, the cultural terroir was so wonderful there. Yes.
You sent a picture that shows bamboo slats over, or like a bamboo awning. Is this a drying room for the leaves?
It's a yes, it's a drying room. Withering is the term that they would use. Also, if you can imagine from that same question, if you took a bamboo basket, again with slats on it, they use that to actually roll the leaves on. So this is hand rolled. And that's another reason that this is so precious. Yes.
A participant says the warm leaves have a malty umami scent, and then the wet leaves have floral notes.
Malty umami scent as dry leaves, wet leaves with floral notes. So there's definitely a huge difference. And as you start to really think about this tea, part of the difference that you're going to think about is either floral or fruity, because again, we in the West, actually everywhere, have a hard time using precise words that mean precisely the same thing to everybody when it comes to aroma and taste. And both of those, in my mind, are synonymous when it comes to tea evaluations. Yes.
This participant also notes then next that the tea liquor itself has this sweet scent like dried fruit, but then it's smooth like caramel.
Sweet scent like dried fruit, but then smooth like caramel. And I like this comment because it addresses how the Chinese would talk about this, which is it does have, they feel this as having a fruitiness to it, fruity, and you said the caramel, which suggests the burnt sugar type of aroma, maybe a little sweetness. The Chinese typically would be saying a little bit of honey. So the dried fruit, and so we're all in the same ballpark. So I love the fact that you're getting this description. The other thing that's special about this is the size of these leaves is quite large. And in general, it doesn't follow that age equals size, because the 3,500-year-old tree that we saw, the leaves were surprisingly smaller, and we were actually shocked. And that particular tree was huge, but it wasn't tall. So think maybe at most 30 feet. I don't even think it was 30 feet. It was probably about 20 to 22 feet, but enormous trunk, and almost that bushiness of an oak rather than willowiness of something that is 80 feet high and is just less concentrated. So it's different. The ancient trees in every area in China do have a differentness. And in Fengcheng, I think I mentioned they're between 9 and 10, or ancient trees grow in an area of about 10,000 acres. They're not monoclonal, so they're not planted together. They're interspersed with other plants.
In the one of the pictures you sent then, I think is of the leaves themselves, and I see, looks like, yeah, giant leaves, but stems. So is it like, is the pick like 3 leaves and some stem, or?
Yes, and so with red tea, especially ancient tree, the pick typically is going to be a bud and 3 leaves. And usually what happens in the processing steps, they'll take and separate out what they want for the premium grade product. So usually the premium grade is if there are buds left, and if there are tender leaves left, they'll put 1 or 2 with that. The other they'll put as a lesser grade. So they pick everything together. And it's really interesting because unlike green tea, where you pick specifically what you want, right? Bud or bud and leaf or bud and 2 leaves, it's different here in this part of China. They pick an aggregate total of either a bud and 3 or a bud and 4, and then do the finishing later on in the process. And that's actually after the baking, although the gross finishing occurs as they're piling the tea. And the very fine finishing occurs after the last mechanical step of baking. So once it's dry, then they look to even it out. If you're going to sell premium grade, it better be all approximately the same thing. If you're going to sell, you know, grade 5 or however they label that, then you have much more freedom to have all sorts of other things in there.
Any other comments, folks?
So while you're thinking about this, I'll quickly go through the process too, so you have that in mind. You have the pick, you have the wither. The wither usually occurs over about a 12-hour period. And what they're trying to do is get the leaves down to a certain amount of moisture left in them, roughly about 58, 59, 60%. And again, this is all by smell and feel. They know what they think it should look like. They know what they think it should smell like. Yes.
Participant says this is her experience is that the tea is juicy with a mild astringency further down in the cup.
Juicy with mild astringency further in the cup. This is this commentator's experience. I am so happy that you offered up juicy. This is juicy. And in my mind, as we're talking about this juicy, let's think about this for a minute, because it's juicy with a slightly heavier juiciness to it. In other words, there's some viscousness to this as well, which is one of the delights of this tea. It's mellow, juicy, and somewhat viscous. And so just a really, really easy tea to drink. You highlighted before hints of fruit, a little feeling of caramel, hints of honey, all of this stuff going on with this. Just a wonderful, wonderful tea. So again, as we're going through the process, you wither, pick, wither, and then you roll the leaves. If it's a traditional indigenous roll, it's rolled by hand. If it's a little bit more mechanized, they have a machine which actually goes ahead and rolls the tea. So either way is valid. And then after the roll, you get down and you actually pile the tea. You actually, there's one step in between, and they call it de-aglomerize. And really what that means is when you have rolled the tea in the machine, it comes out hot, it comes out sticky. The aroma, by the way, when you approach this type of a farm, you can smell 2 miles away and then use your nose as the GPS to get to this farm because it is so aromatic as they're going through this. So they pull it apart to cool it down and then they pile. Why are they piling? They're piling in order to oxidize the tea. And what are you doing when you oxidize? Really what you're doing is you're allowing the inside of the leaf to interact with oxygen. You're providing an environment. What sort of environment? You're providing something between 32 and 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Why? That's a bell curve for oxidation. So when you get to 88 degrees, it oxidizes the fastest. So if you don't want fast oxidation, you either are less temperature or you're more temperature. But 88 is right at that peak where you're going to get maximum oxidation. 150 and more, you denature. You start to denature that enzyme, which means you start to make it ineffective. It won't oxidize after that point. Yes.
Another comment from a participant who is getting dried fruit in both the warm leaves and the tea liquor and a focusing energetic for her.
Oh, I love this. A dried fruit in the tea liquor and a focusing energetic. And actually, for me, I get two things. And this is why I really like this comment. I not only get a warmingness to me, just my body temp seems to be increasing, but I also do get that. And I wouldn't have used the word focus, but I completely understand and agree with it. I use the word, for me, it's just a mental relaxation. It's like, oh, wow, okay, I'm present. You know, that's what it is. It helps me become present. And so saying focus, that is also about being present. So great comment.
Participant asked, can you describe the aroma from the farm? What's it like?
It is almost like, I want to say, as you're approaching, it really seems like it's plummy. It's that strong. The air it's like approaching a vineyard from a distance away. You can kind of smell where it is when they're actually harvesting and working on it. But alcohol, that fermentation and the alcohol give you a particular profile. This has no alcohol, so you don't get that profile. And instead, the fruitiness of it, and again, it's like a concentrated dark fruit. Now, once you get to tasting this does not taste plummy to me. So I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that when they're piling this stuff, it's the intensity of that experience. It makes me think, oh, plumminess. All right. So I've gotten you through, you pile the tea for X amount of time, and every farmer is different. It's usually at least 4 hours. Some farmers pile it for up to 12 hours. And again, this is a temperature related to what you think and how fast you want it to oxidize. What percentage of oxidation do you want to achieve? Usually you're aiming for 90 or so, a little bit more. What happens if you say to yourself, oh yeah, you know, my neighbor does about 91, 92. I'm going to really make mine real oxidized. I'm going to oxidize it up to about 96%. So when you over oxidize, the very terrible word in tea circles appears. And it's a word that in the tea industry, you never want to hear. Sour. So can you correct a sour mistake? It is very hard. I don't want to say impossible, but what that indicates is an overoxidation. And this may be why indigenous peoples, when they oxidize, they tend in general to oxidize at a lesser level. And so from my perspective, especially in the Isla Mountains, you get more fruit, a very interesting difference. This one's oxidized, again, closer to 90, 91, 92%. And so you get a deepness to this aroma. There's nothing that just passes you by in a whiff. It really kind of sticks with you. And that's one of the reasons that I like this tea so much. Once you have piled sufficiently, and you're checking all the time until you feel as a farmer or producer, it's piled enough, then you bake it. And you bake it for a couple of reasons. The real reason is you want to get the moisture content of the leaves down in between 3 and 5%. So that's for shelf stability. If you have more than 6%, you're up there at 7 or 8%, then over time, the tea leaves, especially in certain storage conditioned environments, will mold. And that's not a good thing. Lastly, after you have baked it sufficiently, what you do is, what the farmer does is, again, they select out what grade they want to lead with. In other words, if they feel a bud in the first leaf or a bud in 2 leaves is going to give the best flavor, and that's what they want to charge a certain price for, then that's how they package it. And then the rest is either packaged for tea bag consumption or packaged for some other purpose, but it usually doesn't go on the market unless it is specifically labeled grade 3 or grade 4 or grade 5. Couple more stories because we got interrupted, and then I'll end it. So in 1958, this tea was so famous in China that it was selling at that time for the equivalent of about $1,000 a pound. So it was enormously famous, and it was really famous for people abroad because in China, generally speaking, they weren't consuming this because at that time, the most special stuff was usually sold abroad because they were trying to get foreign currency and so forth. So from a historical standpoint, the other thing that occurred is as the Chinese saw that this is becoming very valuable outside of China, what they did is they said to farmers, okay, we will trade ration tickets for you growing and processing more of this tea. So that was interesting too, because farmers then had an incentive to go ahead and grow and process more of this tea, which they did. And you're tasting the reason why. I mean, this stuff is incredible. And the world had such little access. Now, quite a lot is produced, but not of the ancient tree. Of the ancient tree, I think in Fengqing, the end result, I believe, is about 225 pounds. So, you know, when you think, let's say that not even one person in China drinks it. So you eliminate 1.8 billion people. For the rest of the world, 225 pounds, that's nothing. And so there isn't much of this. It's dear. And now as you're tasting this, I think you can see why. So let me wrap up here. All right. Your responsibility this week is to have a great week. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week. You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.